In today's video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to install the interior ambient lighting kit in your 10th generation Honda Civic hatchback. So behind me here, I've got my 2017 Honda Civic Type R, which in my opinion should have come from the factory with an ambient lighting kit. But Honda unfortunately makes it as an accessory, which costs about 120 or so Canadian. But I'm going to show you how to install that. Again, there's going to be a few things that we're going to have in order for this install to go smoothly and successfully. So just starting from the left here, I've got some paper towels, some isopropyl rubbing alcohol, various trim panel removal tools, some masking tape, a 10mm ratchet, some diagonal cutters, a Phillips screwdriver, some push pins or thumbtacks that's going to be used to mark the dash panels that we have to drill through, and of course the drill bits, installation instructions that you can download from collegehillshonda.com, and last but not least, the most important piece is the actual ambient lighting kit itself, which is Honda part number 08E10-TEA-100A. Now this specific ambient lighting kit is for the Type R, so it's naturally in a red color. However, if you've got a standard Civic hatchback, that they also make a blue version of it as well. Now what the interior ambient lighting kit does is that on the Civics they do not come standard with any lighting in the footwell area. So at nighttime when you're driving, the footwell area, at least for now, is completely black. And so what that kit will do is that it'll actually have a little tiny LED on each side of the front seats footwell areas, and it just shines a very subtle but dim light. Now before we do any electrical work on our vehicle, we want to make sure that the electrical system is de-energized, and we can do so by taking the negative cable off of the battery. The disassembly work begins on the passenger side of our vehicle, and so what I'm going to do here is we're going to take off the side dash panel cover, and this can be accomplished by opening up the glove box and then carefully placing your hand underneath the cover and popping out the 4 clips along this edge. And once you pull out the front lip, you can just gently wiggle this and they should all come out. So there's those 1, 2, 3, 4 clips, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 retaining tabs. Now once the side cover has been removed, we're going to go ahead and remove this lower dash panel cover, which is going to be held in with 4 clips located here, 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 and here. So to open that, you just gently pry down, and then they just pop out like this, and right into that corner, and then you just pull it out. The next step here is to remove the 2 8mm bolts that are located here and behind the glove box here. The easiest way to do this is to actually pop open the glove box, squeeze the sides in to tip it right down until it's about this height, and pull the glove box away. With the glove box removed, it exposes the 2 bolts in question, which is located here and here. Take a Phillips and undo it. Undo the 1, 2, 3, 4 screws holding the glove box surround to the car. One, 2, 3, 4. Now once the screws have been undone, we actually need to pull this enclosure off. There's 2 clips located right here and then 4 more down the side. So to pull that out, you just have to grab it and just give it a gentle wiggle. Do the same for the other side here, and just carefully manipulate it so it comes out without breaking anything. And then tip it down, and then carefully remove it from the car. Now the next step is to go onto the driver's side of the vehicle and remove this lower dash cover. And how we're going to do this is similar to how we've done things on the right. There are 3 clips that run up the left side, followed by 2 clips here, and then 2 clips up top here with another 2 below. Now it's worth mentioning that there are wiring harnesses as well as a temperature sensor hose that connects to a sensor in this area. So we want to be mindful as we dismantle it to be very careful to disconnect those with the cover still very close to the dash. So reaching underneath, we can give it a gentle tug like this, and then pulling the cover forward slightly, exposing the wiring harness connectors, which you can release by pressing the tab here and pulling, and going to the temperature sensor side and doing it similar. So release the wiring harness, and then carefully, while holding the sensor actually with one hand, push off the hose. Now the reason why I stress the emphasis on being super careful is that if you look at this ambient temperature sensor for the interior of the car, it's held in with a bunch of just flimsy tabs. Remove the left driver's side armrest trim using a set of clean plastic pry tools. There are 4 clips. 1, 2, 3, 4. Using some masking tape, we're going to mask off this area right here, as well as the corner of this trim piece, to prevent scratching to our car. I'm also going to protect this upper area right here, even this top part of the trim, so that we can cover that appropriately. Now it's important to not let this trim panel tape go onto the nav screen, because at the end of the day this has got to come off, and of course it's got to come off separately. And even tape along this edge where the start button is, just so that I don't scratch anything on my car. Now the next step is to pull off this left trim, and there's clips located here, 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 and here. And how we accomplish this is actually pulling this trim upwards. So I'm just going to grab my trim tool and very carefully get it in between this line and just lift up to expose the trim. Okay guys, so next step here is to remove the HVAC control from the dash. And what we're going to do is we're just going to carefully peel back the tape for the HVAC control that we used for masking earlier, just to get it out of the way. We're going to very carefully pry on the sides of the HVAC control. And this is all plastic, and everything on this car is held with clips. But you have to be careful. There's a clip here, there's a clip here, here, and here, and then conversely 2 alignment clips that sit above here. And I think the safest way to do it, or to remove this, is to locate on the right side and the left side of the HVAC control the actual white clip. And just very carefully put in a plastic pry tool and just pry by putting your tool in and just giving a gentle twist. And you can actually see it just pop out. And we do the same for the driver's side. Just give it a twist back and forth like that, and then very carefully remove it from the car. And then you'll see on the back of the HVAC control that there are 2 wiring harnesses. We're just going to disconnect both of them. Now with the HVAC control removed, it's important to note that this connector here is called a 12-pin connector. This is actually going to plug into our ambient light wiring harness, and then on our ambient light harness there's going to be an alternate connector that looks exactly like this that's going to plug into the back of the HVAC unit, and that's to pull power from the HVAC system to power those ambient lights. So the next step is that we have to take out our head unit from the car's dash, and we're going to accomplish this by undoing the 2 8mm screws located here and here. And once those have been undone, we have to very carefully pull on the head unit to undo 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 clips. Now once we've undone the 2 bolts, before we actually try to pull the nav unit out, we want to take a look at underneath the unit. And you'll notice that there's 2 connectors here. We're just going to carefully push in those tabs to disconnect them. So there's 1. And then 2. And then I had mentioned earlier that there are 3 pop clips on each side of the head unit. The best way to do it is to grab your hands right here and then go underneath the unit and just carefully apply some pressure to break free the lower clips, and then you can grab the top corner and then pull that out on the one side, and then repeat with the driver's side. Now it is worth mentioning that once you pull the head unit free, there's actually a little wiring clip that holds the HVAC wiring harness to the radio itself. And if you guys can see it, it's actually just right in there. And we can just free that up by pushing on that clip with a screwdriver to release that tab. There we go. And then carefully pull out the head unit. Now on the back side of our head unit, there's a whole bunch of harnesses that we have to disconnect as well. So you can't really mess up the order of how they get plugged in because they're all keyed, but just make sure that you make note of the number that you disconnect. So now that we've removed all the stuff from the interior of the vehicle, including the stereo and the navigation unit, we're going to start off with the driver's side lower dash cover. And you can see that those are the buttons for traction control, or the button, and then here is that temperature sensor. So this is the back side of our panel. Now if you look down towards this channel where we adjust the telescoping, or sorry, the steering wheel tilt of our steering column, you'll see there are these markings right here. There's a small one and then ultimately the large one. You want to take a push pin and you want to press firmly into the center of each of those crosshairs. So there's 1, and then there's 2. Now you want to make sure those scribe marks are actually right in the center. And we want to give it a good press, because what's going to happen is that we're going to progressively use drill bits to core out these holes. Take a drill with a 1/8 inch drill bit and I place it firmly into the middle of that scribe mark that I have, and just drill that out. Do the same. It's important to note that this is a smaller one and that's the bigger one. The smaller one is for the mounting screw and the larger one's for the actual LED. So once we've completed sizing up the mounting holes for the ambient lighting for the driver's side lower panel, we're now going to focus on the passenger side one. Now if you look to the left, there's those 2 big holes, and then if you look closely, though, there are the scribe marks again. We're going to go ahead and follow the same exact procedure using a push pin to mark our holes accordingly. Drill out both with a 1/8 bit. Install your LED lights into the driver's lower dash panel by placing it through and then using the supplied screws in the kit to just screw it on. Do the same for the passenger panel. Now notice on the packaging here that the ambient lighting kit says red L, which means red light. If you have a Civic non-Type R, it will likely say blue L. So go ahead and place the light in, and then attach with the included screw. Okay, so now, before we run our wiring harness into our dash, we actually need to label the harness accordingly with the fuse label that's included in the kit. So I'm just going to undo the harness from the tape, and then we're going to unravel it to expose the fuse holder, which is this piece right here. So we're going to grab and retrieve the actual label. Now before we attach it, we're going to take some rubbing alcohol on a piece of paper, or towels I should say. We're just going to wipe the top of the case here to remove any oils to ensure good adhesion. On the included fuse label, there's a whole bunch of labels. There's stuff in Japanese, one that says 2 amp ambient light, 2 amp, 1, 2, and some wire label. We want the one that says ambient. We're going to take this ambient label and we're going to carefully attach it like that. Give it a good press. Okay guys, so now that we've attached the ambient lights to the actual lower dash covers, it's now time to route the wiring harness through the dash. And so how do you know which side that starts off inside the center of the dash? Well, that's easy. You can actually find what they call a 12-pin connector that looks an awful lot like the one that came off the HVAC unit, which is this one right here. So if you see, these connectors are identical, and the idea here is that the HVAC connector that was once in the HVAC system is going to plug in to this female plug on the wiring harness, and then the ambient light connector is going to go into the back of the HVAC unit, and that's pulling power essentially from the HVAC system to power all this up. So how I'm going to do this is I'm going to take the wiring harness here, so it's sort of like a Y shape. So I'm going to feed the long end down through the dash and just have it pop out of the passenger side glove box area. What the instructions say here is that they want us to parallel the two 12-pin connectors in terms of length, like this. This is parallel them like that, and then run them side by side, and then using a wire tie to tie them right here together. Now what we're supposed to do is that in order for us to get the length correct, we want to put the two 12-pin connectors, one from the ambient lighting, one for the HVAC unit, side by side in our hand. Okay, so it's got to be like this. And then what we're going to do is we're going to hold the wires together, and right behind this clipped wire from the factory harness, where it pops onto the bottom of the nav unit, we're going to then attach it to the wiring harness. Okay, so again, 12-pin, 12-pin, orient the wiring harness in such a way that the lengths are the same, and then we're going to use the included wire tie. We're going to go ahead and wrap this ambient light harness and just pull the wire tie loosely, just again to parallel the two cables together, make sure they're the same length, and pull back as required. And you'll notice here that on the ambient harness, I didn't actually wrap this wire wrap all around this loose one that's supposed to go to the driver's side, or even around the wires for the piggyback connection. I'm just going to pull it back so it's right by this foam on the connector. And the reason why is because they're the same length that way. I'm just going to tighten that down. And the nice thing with the Honda wraps here is that they can be released by lifting up the tab if you mess up. So that's what that looks like. Again, here's the free side, white connector. That's going to go to the driver's side. And then I just tied the wire portion that feeds into the passenger side, and I didn't bother tying any of the colored wires that are exposed for the piggyback connector. Okay guys, so this was a little bit of a doozy trying to get this bloody thing in. So I showed you how to line up the wiring harnesses. Now the passenger side, it routes up and it follows, and it's actually wire wrapped to that main wiring harness. And then as it passes through, you can sort of see it follow this wiring harness at the top cross member right there. So you see that? It passes over. So this is where the glove box is, above it. And you can see this wiring harness. So there's a tie there, and there's a tie back there, and you saw me tie it earlier way back in there. You guys can see that. Okay? So we have 3 ties, and then what happens is it wraps around and it follows the big wiring harness, and then it comes down to the side, and then you'll see that there's a little clip here. See this clip right in there? You see the green mark on the wiring harness? It says that green mark needs to be wire wrapped onto the main harness directly above the wiring clip. And then conversely, it continues down the wiring harness, and you see the ambient fuse label that we added on earlier, and then you have one more wire wrap on the bottom. And so that's the passenger side. Now for the driver side, okay, it goes down below there, if you can see it. You see that wire wrap that I still haven't cut, and it follows that temperature sensor that pops out right here. You can see that it's kind of fallen into the dash. Okay, so that's that ambient temperature sensor on technology. And then you see it's wrapped with a wire wrap, and then here, which is where that temperature sensor is, then if you go directly below it, there's another green marking on the harness, and it comes with a special wire wrap that has a little pin that pokes through that bracket and then exposes the connector to the LED. Okay, so head unit right here. Now earlier we had disconnected this blue connector, and it turned out that it's just a little jumper wire that goes from the front to the back. So I'm just going to plug this in now, and then plug that connector, and then little gray connector on the back, like so. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the tape holding in that wiring harness. I'm going to start fishing out all the different connectors that have now since fallen into the back of the dash. I'm going to slowly reconnect each one of them. Now on the back of our stereo unit, you'll notice here that there's a gray connector that's open. That's actually intentional, and it's not meant to be plugged in. I don't know how well you guys can see that, but basically it's a free connection. Okay, and I'm looking in the dash here, and I don't see any open connectors that are that color, so we can carefully just slide this in, making sure that our harnesses don't get snagged, lining up the tabs, and then locking it in like so. Now, for the wiring harness, we want to pull this forward and snap that wire clip that we had popped off earlier and reattach it. Once it's snapped in, we want to reattach the wiring clip. And then underneath our radio, there's this connector, this gray one, that we want to carefully plug back in on the underside, like so. Okay. And now there should only be 2 harnesses left. They both go into the HVAC control, a white and a gray. And you see in the back, there's two connectors. Reattach the HVAC control. Plugging that in, and plugging that in, carefully lining up the tabs and snapping that also back into place. Couple important things that can confuse a lot of people. If you notice a message on the front that says to start engine, fully depress brake plus clutch and then press the start button. Now, if you don't and you only step on the clutch, the car is never going to start. And the reason why is the anti-theft system needs to reinitialize, which is by pressing the brake really hard, the clutch all the way down in neutral, and then starting the car. And that's how the car will start. Now, the radio. It's going to take a little while to boot up. You'll see the Honda logo come on, and it'll probably come on for about a minute or two. Another thing you'll notice too, that all sorts of indicator lights and what have you are showing up the dash, like the traction control off, VSA's off, it says drive carefully, systems initializing, and a whole host of things going on. And so at the end of the day, you just have to drive it for a little while. It recalibrates itself. Don't do anything stupid. And then after probably about 10 minutes of driving and you shut off and restart the car several times, that everything will be in good working order. I'm not sure how well you can see that red glow. I don't know how GoPro's camera is, but you see that ambient glow on a box that I have on the floor on the passenger side. And then conversely, I'm wearing a white sandal here, and you can see the red bouncing off of my foot. So I think it looks pretty darn cool.